No one ever questioned Adam's beauty until the night screams echoed from her mansion that night. The entire suburb of Victoria Gardens was shaken. The sound that came from a Fumilayo grand compound was unlike anything anyone had heard before. It wasn't just a cry, it was a wail so haunting that people froze in their homes, their hearts pounding with fear. It seemed to come from deep within, as though the earth itself was groaning. The city, usually full of the noise of cars and distant chatter, fell silent. The scream echoed across the streets, bounced off the tall walls of Fumilayo's mansion, and roared through the neighborhood, leaving an eerie stillness in its wake. Fumilayo was known far and wide for her beauty, her flawless skin, the way her eyes seemed to shine like stars in the night, and her smile that made heads turn wherever she went. She had built an empire in the bustling city. A successful Beauty Fumilayo's makeup line was the most sought after in the city. Women across the country would travel miles just to sit at her feet and learn her secrets, hoping to capture even a fraction of her beauty. Her mansion stood tall in the heart of the city, with lush gardens, sparkling fountains, and high gates that kept the world at a respectful distance. Fumilayo lived in luxury. Inside, her place was decorated with expensive art, soft velvet couches, and marble floors that gleamed in the sunlight. She had everything she could ever want, and it all seemed perfect. Though Fumilayo lived in the city now, she had not always been surrounded by wealth and admiration. She had grown up in a small village called Azundu, where life was simple and people knew their roots. It was there that Fumilayo first learned about true beauty. Her grandmother Mamaki had been a healer, a woman who knew the power of the earth. Mamaki had passed down the knowledge of herbs and ancient secrets, whispering them to Fumilayo as a child. Beauty is not just what you see, Mki would say, it is power over others, but you must be willing to pay the price. Fumilayo remembered those words. Well, as she grew older, she became consumed with fear of losing her beauty. She could not bear the thought of wrinkles marking her smooth skin or her hair thinning like that of the older women in the village. She watched how the other women aged, how their once vibrant laughter became tired and their proud features into the shadows of their past. She swore that this fate would never be hers. So while the other young women danced in the moonlight or spent time at the river, Fumilayo stayed inside practicing the forbidden rituals her grandmother had once hinted at when she moved to the city. Fumilayo quickly realized that beauty was a currency in the crowded streets, and glittering MS beauty was power, and power could get you anything you wanted. But she knew that one day her beauty will fade, she will grow, and no longer use her beauty to her advantage. She started makeup line using her grandmother's secret herbs as the foundation for her products. Word spread fast. The makeup didn't just enhance a woman's looks, it transformed them. Skin glowed, wrinkles disappeared, and eyes sparkled with a new light. Addicted to fame grew. With each passing day, her face appeared on billboards in Atacana and on the screens of every TV in the city. People adored her, especially men. They cherished her beauty, hanging on to her every word. Some would send her expensive gifts, while others would do anything just to be close to her. Influence was unmatched. Many powerful men wanted as attention, hoping to be with her because they believed she could bring them luck, success, or even a bit of her magic. With her beauty came great power, and a damn man knew how to use that power to her own advantage. Other young women looked up to her. They wanted to be her. They would gather outside her makeup studio, hoping for a glimpse of her radiant face or a kind word. M signed up for her makeup lessons, willing to pay large sums of time just to learn the secrets behind her flawless skin and the makeup that made her so alluring. As wealth grew even more, as did her reputation. Her life seemed perfect on the outside, a fairy tale of success and beauty. Every evening, Fumilayo would lock herself in one of her grand rooms. The walls, painted a deep red, were covered in mirrors, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfumes and oils. It was here, under the soft glow of golden lamps, that Fumilayo performed her nightly rituals. Inside her private chambers, far away from the eyes of her admirers, she mixed ingredients that were never meant to be touched by human hands. One by one, women came to learn from Fumilayo, and beautiful ones went missing. Some, their memories were clouded, their spirits weakened, but no one could explain why. They just knew that after visiting Fumilayo, they felt different, like a part of them had been taken away. But there was one woman who felt something even stronger when she stepped into Fumilayo's studio. Her name was Fatima. Fatima was a makeup artist who just moved to Victoria Gardens, but was different from the other women. She had a strong faith in God and always prayed before making any big decisions. She believed that God would show her the way and protect her from harm. Fatima had heard about Fumilayo like everyone else in the city. She had heard about her beauty and her success, but Fatima didn't just rush in. Before she did anything, she prayed God. She said, "If this is where you want me to go, lead me, and if it's not, protect me." Fatima trusted God completely. When she finally decided to take lessons for a month at Fumilayo's studio, Atatu walked in with hope in her heart, but as soon as she stepped through the door, she felt uneasy. The room was beautiful with Big mirrors and shiny makeup tables, but something didn't feel right. Fatima couldn't explain it, but her spirit told her something was wrong. It was as if cold wind had brushed past her, making her heart race. She felt out of place. The women waiting in the studio looked quiet and blank, as if they weren't really there. Fatima watched them closely, prayed silently in her heart. Lord, show me what this feeling is, she whispered. Help me understand. When Fumilayo finally appeared, she looked just as beautiful as always. Her skin glowed, her eyes sparkled, and her smile was as sweet as honey. But Fatima noticed something strange in Fumilayo's eyes. Something that made her feel cold inside. Fumilayo greeted her warmly. You must be Fatima, she said with her soft, perfect voice. I've heard about you. Want to grow your makeup business? Yes, Fatima smiled politely, but deep inside she felt the same cold feeling in her heart. She nodded, but the words didn't come easily. Come, let me show you how it's done, Fumilayo said, guiding a tattoo to a chair. As she began to talk about her makeup techniques, something inside Fatima was stirring. Her mind felt light, her thoughts cloudy. And she didn't like the feeling at all. She began to pray again, asking for strength. As Fumilayo continued to speak, Fatima felt something dark in the air. It was as if there was an invisible force in the room, something that wanted to pull her in. But Fatima's faith was strong. She could feel God's protection around her. Even in that cold place, Fumilayo suddenly stopped speaking and looked at Fatima closely. Her smile faded for a moment, and her eyes seemed to search Fatima. So pure, different, Adam said softly, almost in a whisper. Fatima's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? She asked, though she already knew that Fumilayo could sense her strength. Fumilayo smiled again, but this time it wasn't the warm smile from before. It was something else. I've seen many women come and go, but you are not like the others. Fatima felt a chill run down her spine. She prayed even harder, her heart steady with faith. Fumilayo explained most of her products and displayed a plan on how the lessons will go from the following day. Fatima said nothing more. She stood up, thanked Fumilayo politely, and walked out of the studio. Her heart was pounding, but her faith was stronger. She knew something was deeply wrong with Adama, but she didn't fully understand it yet. As she left the studio and stepped into the bright city streets, Fatima felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She knew she had just been in the presence of something evil, but God had protected her. Fatima kept attending her lessons at Adam's studio, but something had changed. Adam man no longer seemed happy to have Fatima around. In fact, she looked uncomfortable whenever Fatima walked through the door. Most of the time, Fumilayo sent one of her assistants to help Fatima, avoiding her as much as possible. At first, Fatima tried to be patient, but after a few days she couldn't stay quiet anymore. She had paid a lot of money to be taught by Fumilayo herself, not by some assistant. One afternoon, when Fumilayo once again tried to send her assistant, Fatima calmly but firmly spoke up. I didn't come here to be taught by someone else, she said. I came to learn from you. Fumilayo's eyes flashed with irritation, but she kept her sweet smile. Of course, she said, dragging her feet as she walked over to Fatima. It was clear that she didn't want to be near her, but she couldn't refuse outright. Finally, Fumilayo stood next to Fatima by the mirror. Fatima watched as she adjusted her hair and then glanced at Fatima without much interest. We have no models today, Fumilayo said, her voice soft but cold. So there's nothing we can practice on. You have to come back tomorrow. Fatima sat on the chair watching as Fumilayo pretended to be busy signing papers and smiling at other clients, clearly happy to have gotten rid of her for the day. Just as Fatima sat glued to her phone, the door swung open and in walked Oni, Fatima's friend. She had a bright smile on her face as she waved at Fatima as she stepped inside the studio. I called my friend, Fatima said, her voice calm but firm. We can practice on her. Adam's smile faltered for a split second and disappointment flashed across her face. She hadn't expected Fatima to find a solution so quickly. She had wanted to push her out for the day, but now with her standing in front of her, she had no choice but to continue the lesson. Fine, Adam said, her voice tight as she forced a smile. Let's begin. Fedi sat down in the chair, excited to be part of the lesson. Fumilayo started gathering her makeup tools, but before she could apply anything, Mu's face, Fatima quietly reached for each item. She closed her eyes and prayed over every brush, every powder, every cream. Ad's eyes narrowed as she watched Fatima silently pray, but she didn't say a word. She simply waited, her smile becoming more strained with each passing moment. There was a tension in the air that no one else seemed to notice, but Fatima could feel it. Finally, the makeup was done. When she looked in the mirror, she gasped in amazement. Her face looked flawless, almost like someone else. The makeup had transformed her. She smiled brightly and touched her cheeks. I love it, Asha exclaimed. I won't take this off until it feds by itself. Fatima smiled, happy that her friend liked the results. As the lesson came to an end, Fatima and gathered their things to leave. Kitayo, still wearing her tight smile, called out to Fatima as she walked toward the door. Next time, Fumilayo said, her voice sweet but with a strange urge, you'll be applying everything you've learned. I expect you to show me what you can do. The following morning, Fatima phone rang. It was her friend. As she spoke on the phone, her voice trembled with fear. Fatima whispered, something strange happened last night. Fatima skipped a bit. What do you mean? She asked, already fearing the worst. I can't remember much, continued, her voice shaky. It's like a fog is covering my mind. I remember walking into my bedroom, but after that, it's all blurry. My head feels strange and I've had nightmares. Fatima asked, her voice firm but gentle. Tell me about them. Hesitated, her breath heavy. Through the phone, I see shadows, Fatima, dark figures chasing me through a thick forest, and there's this feeling like something is trying to pull me into the darkness. Fatima clenched her jaw. She had heard enough. Listen to me. You need to pray. Whatever is happening to you, we need to ask God for help. I think there's something evil in Adam's makeup. Go's voice was barely a whisper. But how can makeup do this to me? I don't know yet, Fatima said, her voice low but firm. But I'm going to find out. After speaking on the phone, Fatima prayed, quietly asking for guidance as she prepared to attend her makeup class with Adi. When Fatima arrived, the studio was buzzing with clients and her model was already seated ready for her lesson. But today something was different. Fumilayo stood by her side holding every makeup product herself. She made sure that Fatima didn't get to touch any of the items directly. Fumilayo would hold each powder, each foundation, and each tube of makeup. Fatima would only collect with a brush when it was time to apply them. Fatima found this strange but tried not to let it bother her. She focused on her work care, applying the makeup to the model's face, but as she continued, the makeup didn't seem to blend properly. The colors looked wrong, and nothing was sitting on the skin the way it should. She could feel the eyes of the other new students in the studio watching her, whispering quietly among themselves. When Fatima was finally done and stepped back to see her work, she froze. The makeup was horrible. Her model looked worse than when she had started. The foundation was patchy, the colors clashed, and the whole face looked like something out of a nightmare. Fatima's heart sank. She had done makeup for years before she moved to this part of the city. She had worked on brides' parties and special events, and people had always loved her work. It wasn't like her to make such a terrible mistake. She couldn't understand what had gone wrong. Fumilayo stood next to her, still holding the makeup in her hands, her smile tight and controlled. Don't worry, Fatima, she said softly, her voice dripping with false sweetness. There's always room to learn. I think you just forgot to use the concealer. Fatima stared at her confused. But I did use the concealer, she said, her voice low. I used everything you handed to me. The model, who had been sitting patiently, now rushed to the bathroom, clearly upset. Fatima could hear the sound of water running as the woman tried to scrub the makeup off her face. Fatima's mind raced. She had followed every step, used every product that her DMA had given her, yet the results were worse than anything she had ever done before. She turned to Fumilayo, her voice filled with frustration. I don't understand what went wrong. I know I can do better than this. Let me try to make up on myself to prove it. Fumilayo's smile tightened even further and she shook her head. Oh, Fatima, I'm afraid your time is up for today. I have other students to attend to and I can't stay any longer, but I do need assistance, Fatima protested. I can sit by myself and practice on my own face. Just give me a few minutes. I'll clean up after I'm done. Fatima sighed, shaking her head again. It's not about that, Fatima. The studio is very busy today and I need to make sure everything runs smoothly. You can come back tomorrow and we'll continue then. Fatima felt a wave of frustration wash over her, but there was nothing more she could say. She could feel that Fumilayo was pushing her away on purpose.